Hi, I'm Jeff Hughes. Welcome to Cowes on the Isle of Wight, where we're celebrating the America's Cup Jubilee. You're about to see some of the most beautiful yachts in the world. You know, I do a bit of sailing and I do a bit of racing, but compared to what's out there, all I do is mess about in boats. There are priceless classics and the latest high-tech racers. More than 200, the biggest collection you're ever likely to see. It's the 150th birthday party for the America's Cup, the world's oldest sporting trophy at the most expensive end of yacht racing. The end where even millionaires have to club together to compete. The Jubilee week got us up to a very early start. New Zealand, who currently hold the Cup, made a big show of bringing it back to Britain. It was a Maori dawn ceremony. We had to be there, really. For one thing, we don't get to see many Maori warriors on the Isle of Wight. And for another, we certainly never see the Cup. It's beautiful. It's British. And it started life as the 100 Guineas Cup back in the reign of Queen Victoria. It's hardly been in the country since because although we invented the race, we've never actually won it. 1851, the year of the Great Exhibition. Britain rules the waves and all that. And the Royal Yacht Squadron in Cowes decide to prove it with an international yacht race. A particular invitation was sent out to the New York Yacht Club and their new schooner, America. Fast? We'll see about that, they thought. This is probably one of the last pictures taken of the original schooner America. 2 months after this picture was taken, she was wrecked in a storm. And this is a replica of the boat the New Yorkers sailed over. It turned out to be so fast that the British all backed out of the race, and it took a sharp letter in the Times newspaper to make them face up to the challenge. Honour had to be satisfied. And on the 22nd of August, 1851, the starting cannon was fired. Just 14 British boats plus America for a race around the island. Now, I've done around the island a couple of times, and it's quite a hairy experience, you know, when you've got that many boats coming to one point around a mark. It's quite an exciting feeling, and you've got to have a very brave navigator. And especially as in the first race, it was probably won by a manoeuvre that was frowned upon. It was when America disregarded the shallows around the Nab Lighthouse and actually cut the corner off. The British yachtsmen never did that. They always went round the shallows. America cut the corner off and went from 5th to 1st place. And that's what wins yacht races. America took the trophy home where it was renamed in her honour, the America's Cup. But the really amazing thing about it was what followed. The Americans proved unbeatable for 132 years. It was 1983 before anyone finally cracked it.
Every wharf, every boat was jammed with people. The Australians had provided a mountain of champagne which their crew attacked with gusto. Meanwhile,
the team was Australia. The yacht was Australia too. It was a national triumph.
The quote the Prime Minister gave to the people of Australia, he said, any boss that sacked his employee for not turning up today after our historic win was a bum.
Alan Bond invested 10 million in the challenge.
Moulded the nation together at the time, and which was fantastic. And I think this is brings some part of that feeling of achievement for all the people of Australia. Well, it's the pinnacle of design, tactics, the development of sails and technology, and you've got to be the best of the best on that particular day.
You know, a lot of people say, well, you must have had a feeling of elation. No, it wasn't elation, it was relief that we didn't lose. You know, being involved in the previous America's Cup like a lot of the other team members were, it was just a tremendous chance really to rewrite history and break that 132-year winning streak.
Australia 2 is just one of the show-stealing yachts here this week. It really is a parade of power and glory. The glory is being provided by the old-timers, fine boats, some dating back to the century before last, and here to show they're still well capable of racing. The power's being provided by America's Cup teams limbering up for the next qualifying rounds in 2002. And the 12-metre yachts, the biggest fleet of these rocket ships ever seen, they're here for a World Championship round. These chaps measure themselves by how many Olympic gold medals they've got. But one sight has taken everyone's breath away. Nothing typifies the excitement than seeing the armada of yachts with the J-class boats. All the other boats have had a few boats around them, but just look around. Everybody is out to watch the J-class, a great, magnificent sight. Over 200 yachts have travelled from all over the globe. Some have travelled under their own steam, as we yachties call it, travelling on their bottoms. Others have arrived by ship. No, I mean it. This is how she left New York, with over 34 yachts aboard, in carefully welded cradles in the hold. It anchored up, filled the bilges and quietly sank. On purpose, of course. When the open hold filled with water, the yachts could float out and sail off to join the festivities. Expensive? You bet it was expensive. But the America's Cup has only ever been a competition for the world's millionaires and billionaires. They've spent fortunes trying to build the fastest, most elegant yachts and then race them. They've all got to be moored somewhere, and they're big. The harbour master, Stuart McIntosh, and his chaps have laid 5 extra miles of anchor chains to tie them up.
During Cowes Week this year, we had over 1,000 entries, so you might not think it would be an enormous problem to accommodate 200 yachts. But the size and type of yachts is so different from Cowes Week, when the average size yacht is 30 to 40 feet. Even the smallest yachts of the Jubilee are bigger than that. For one thing, because they carry the long traditional bowsprit. The biggest, at 186 feet, is Yachts, a 3-masted staysail schooner. She's actually a lot younger than she looks, built in 1984. She makes an impression, but the real money is anchored offshore. We've got the Danish Royal Yacht, motor yacht coming, Sir Donald Gosling's Leander, an absolutely 76-metre spectacular motor yacht, and then the Aga Khan's Shergar. I don't think anybody who has been involved in sailing, yachting, will ever see the likes of this again. And there's no other boats that thrill the imagination of yachtsmen than the J-class. And it was never more glamorous than in the 30s. These boats were the soap operas of the day,
their owners and crew the star cast, and everyone wanted to follow the drama, even when we lost. Their owners were the new industrialists, self-made men like Thomas Lipton, the tea magnate, and aircraft pioneers Tommy Sopwith and Richard Ferry, celebrities who raced against kings and aristocrats.
I'd like to tell you how much we've all been admiring your beautiful rainbow and the way you and your crew have been handling it.
We feel precisely the same way in regards to Endeavour and the way you handle her. She certainly is a wonderful ship.
Thank you very much.
Socially, these were groundbreaking times. Only 3 of those magnificent Jays survived.
It's a daunting task to take the wheel on a boat like this. And they're not just something, a picture, a painting that you hang up. It is a huge piece of machinery that takes a great amount of skill and courage to sail. Each of the owners do it very bravely, and they sail them very, very efficiently. You have to have all the elements of navigation, sail handling, crew management, and the courage to actually get on the helm and steer at this 180-ton monster. And it's a whole thrill. It's an adrenaline ride.
Exceptional yachts, exceptional owners, and exceptional piles of money. The sail rig on a J alone would set you back about $500,000. But you don't have to be seriously rich to sail on a J-class. Seriously talented might get you aboard, but it's far from plain sailing even then. No safety rails, no harness. The story goes that if you fall overboard racing, you're sacked. Every one of the 30 crew are hand-picked. Top sailors from the deckhands to the skipper, which is just how it was back in the 30s. Then the crews came from fishing communities, hardened and skilled sailors from places like the Essex coast, fashionable waters for early yachtsmen. By the 30s, Tollersbury crews were the pick of the J-class bunch. And one of the most famous of all was Captain Ned Hurd, skipper of Shamrock 5.
I do remember he had quite a booming voice, you know, and I suppose really that's what you get from standing at the back of a J-class and you want something to happen quickly. Oh, I think they got somewhere in the region of about £9 or £10 and retained during the winter. Probably a slightly smaller amount, but what with that and prize money, my grandfather used to come home with his pockets stuffed full of those white fivers, you know, the big ones. He actually managed to afford to build my father and his sister, build them a house each, and still have some to spare. So he did quite well.
Sir Thomas Sopwith's yacht, Endeavour, came closer to winning the America's Cup than any other British challenger. But in 1937, the nation was holding its breath again for a very different reason. She was being towed home across the Atlantic with a skeleton crew aboard. Ned Hurd was the skipper.
They were hit by this hurricane and things got a bit hectic, as you can imagine, in a boat completely unsuitable for the sea with a very deep keel and heavy, 90 tons and long overhangs, typical racing boat.
A search proved fruitless. They were all given up for lost, and then, as if by a miracle, Endeavour reappeared.
Gosport had prepared a royal welcome for the men who brought Endeavour home, and every ship's siren sent up a delirious note of greeting and congratulation.
My grandfather was giving the freedom of the town of Gosport. Of course, the family all went down for this grand business, and he gave a speech and told them all about his life. It was quite interesting. Apparently, I didn't hear it, of course, being only one at the time.
Greetings over, autograph hunters surrounded the men who have written a new chapter in seafaring history.
That was 1937, the last time the big yachts had a go at the America's Cup. It might have been an omen. War was looming. You couldn't give a J-class away. A yacht that today would cost £9 million to build. There were only ever 10 J-class boats built. In America, they were sold for scrap, a fate the British Jays only just escaped. And behind me we have Shamrock and Valshida, two of the J-class yachts, the other being Endeavour. And Endeavour and Valshida were rebuilt from wrecks virtually. Shamrock has always raced and has always been in sailing condition, but has been totally restored. Those were the days, as they say. And what's it like racing on an America's Cup boat today? Well, it's a bit sparse and a lot more expensive. Throwing his all into the next British challenge is Peter Harrison.
I personally invested about 10.4 million to get all of this kick-started. The budget is now about 20 million pounds. The key thing is to try and win that cup. Where do we start?
Runner at 6.
You've got to have a fast boat.
22, 21.
And in fact, I bought the former Nippon Challenge assets. I've bought also this yard here. We've got, of course, a lot of very high-powered computer systems. Then, of course, we've got an administration team and a legal team, of course, and a design team. We start building the hull sometime in November and complete it about April. We'll have 30 involved in that. We haven't been in it since 1987, so it's an enormous mountain to climb.
Why is the America's Cup so hard to win? Well, it's a competition like no other. First, all the challengers have a very grueling event. They have a knockout competition for the Louis Vuitton Cup. The winner of the Louis Vuitton Cup then takes on the challenge for the America's Cup. The present holders are Team New Zealand, and they'll meet that single challenger in February 2003. So it's a very long, hard and expensive road. It's 150 years to the week since that very first race. A race open to all yachts of all nations for the RYS Cup. They started at anchor, hauled up their sails and away. In this anniversary race, nearly 200 yachts are competing, and it takes an hour and 40 minutes to give all classes a flying start over the line. Of the really big racing classics in the world, this is one of the most famous. She's Mariette of 1915, acclaimed as the most beautiful yacht from the finest designer of all time, Nathaniel Herreshoff. Her owner is a quiet American called Tom Perkins.
I was looking for a classic, and I saw Mariette and in her reduced rig, and she was actually considered a dog, very slow and no good, but I knew her pedigree, you know, Herreshoff, and the lines, and so I bought it and put her back originally to the original state, and she's been a rocket.
To give some idea of what's involved, she travels to races around the world with her own support ship, the Atlantide. Mr. Perkins is obviously a very serious sailor.
The schooner is really much more complex than a sloop. Even a J-boat, which it's a big boat, but it has 2 sails. We have 8 sails. And jibing, tacking, all the maneuvers are very complicated.
Below decks, Mariette is equally sensational. Walnut panelling, leather armchairs, paintings, and a fireplace. I think they do shift the silverware for the race days.
I've raced all my life, but there's nothing like a schooner. It's just the greatest.
The yachts head out east on the original 1851 course, past the Napoleonic fort of No Man's Land, to the Nab Light. It's been put back into position especially for this Jubilee race. This time everyone goes round it, even the Americans.
Shall we lock them up?
The fastest boat in the fleet is Stealth, owned by the boss of Fiat, Gianni Agnelli. She's one of the most famous high-tech racing boats in the world, and no doubt she's on for another overall win. Hot on her heels is the big ketch Marichar 3. At 145 feet long, she's a transatlantic speed record holder. When she passes, each one she passes goes, "What was that?" And she's past Crusader, a veteran British challenger from the Cup in 1986, by which year many of the classics in the race were already grand old ladies. Samphire, this splendid gaff-rig cutter, had been afloat for 90 years. Dwarfing most of them, Endeavour, the fastest J-class of her day, sailed with absolute precision. Another super revival story like Endeavour is the America's Cup sloop Freedom. We met a new owner just before the off.
So she's the last winner of the America's Cup in American waters, and people have been trying to get her back for well over 4 or 5 years. And so it's really thrilling to have participated in rebuilding her back to her former glory. We actually worked very closely with Olin Stevens, 93 this year, who came down and rechristened her with some bubbly, and was just thrilled that we were able to put her back to the original specification, removing an engine, removing a refrigerator, beds. Had been taken out of her thoroughbred format. So she's back to the original specification and original lines, actually. Weather willing and God willing, we hope to be one of the best in the modern class.
One of the oldest and one of the smallest yachts in the race is Partridge. She's a gentleman's yacht, built in 1885 and restored from an absolute ruin by Alex Laird. He was 19 when he started, nearly 40 when he finished.
She ended up in my parents' back garden, and I said, she might be there for a year, and she ended up being there for 8 years.
So she had the lawnmower in and the tools and things as well, did she?
Yeah, pretty much, and we ended up casting a 10-ton lead keel in the garden alongside the boat, and the garden ended up looking like a bit of a scrap heap.
Her old lead keel had been melted down for bullets in the war.
A lot of the old boats were taken up to the East Coast and put up in mud berths where they often became houseboats. Yeah. And in fact, that turned out to be a great thing because the mud preserved the hull, and many of them, quite a few of them are here today.
Alex obviously cut no corners. He made patterns so all the fittings could be faithfully reproduced. The original sailmakers, Ratsey, reproduced the original sails. Touches are exquisite. But somebody said you actually carved this headstock on the tiller.
I did do that, and this is actually a miniature copy of one of Britannia's tillers that's in the Max Aitken Museum here in Cowes, and I went up and measured it. If you look in here, I'll let you into the top secret as long as you don't tell anyone. Obviously in 1885, the internal combustion engine hadn't actually been dreamt up. But in here are the engine controls. And, hidden away under the binnacle.
Right.
But you're
not to be used when you're racing.
Not when you're racing, absolutely not. And don't tell anyone about that. But,
so if we see these doors open when you're racing, we shall question your... there'll be a protest somewhere.
We're English, we would never do so.
Partridge sails at a very respectable pace, a good 8 knots. She won the very first race she entered. and she does it with the easiest grace. But after all these years, Alex has decided to move on, and Partridge is for sale. Two things you should know if you're interested. All that wood needs varnishing every year, 4 or 5 coats, no skimping. Oh, and the price, $1.25 million. She is, after all, a gentleman's yacht. There have been thousands of spectators. A handful get the best view as the fleet round the Needles and head for home, up the Solent. Proving they can still win medals, Australia too, with the original crew who took the cup off the Americans for the first time in 132 years. Fiddler, formerly the Stars and Stripes, on which Dennis Conner won the cup back again. Legend has it that while Queen Victoria was watching the finish of the original race, she said to the man with the binoculars, "Who's first?" He said, "I think it's America, ma'am." And she said, "Oh, and which boat is second?" And he looked at her for a moment and said, "Ma'am, there is no second." On the day of the rerun, the winner, ma'am, was Stealth. And who was second? Once again, there did not appear to be one. It is, however, all back to Queen Victoria's place for the evening. All the usual crowd will be there. Every night there's been a round of parties, and this celebration has attracted sirs, ladies, kings, dukes, and others.
It's been a great week, and a massive get-together of anyone who's anyone in sailing. But if you think getting hold of the America's Cup is hard, try getting hold of a late ticket for the Grand Ball at Osborne House, Queen Victoria's favourite residence. I think I better go to the crew party. I think that's where Onslow belongs.
You know, you don't need to be a millionaire to get pleasure from sailing. You can do it on a shoestring. What we've seen at the Jubilee are the very, very best. We've seen the most beautiful yachts in the world, and I hope you've enjoyed looking at them as much as I have.